One of the things that makes The Great Gatsby so important, even 100 years after its publication, is the sort of argument that it is a timeless novel. Really, since the year after Gatsby was published, it was being adapted.
The world was spinning faster then, and shining brighter.
Afraid I haven't been a very good host, old sport. I'm Gatsby.
So it's one of these sort of canonical texts that we have in our culture that keeps getting returned to, alluded to, referenced, repeated, remediated. And I think there's something really powerful to a text that is maybe 100 years old that still speaks to each successive generation of people.
Yes, I read it in middle school because it was assigned, and I wasn't sure of it then, but then I read it, I think, a bit later on in high school, and I really liked it.
There's an argument to be made that the fact that it still is so popular, that people return to it on their own, often reread it, often list it amongst their favorite books they've ever read, speaks to its strength and its power.
The connection between USC and F. Scott Fitzgerald is embodied in Matthew J. Bruccoli, one of our faculty members. As a grad student, he doesn't have a whole lot of money, but he buys the first edition of Gatsby in dust jacket, and that is, in many ways, the first significant acquisition. And it's at an auction that he meets Scotty Fitzgerald, Scott and Zelda's only child, and develops over the years a friendship with her. So a lot of things from the family's collection came to us through Dr. Bruccoli, through that connection that they had.
Over here we have some of F. Scott Fitzgerald's postcards to his daughter. We also have a few of Zelda's postcards to her daughter as well. It says that this is me throwing my books to the people of Quebec. I really think they're funny, and they kind of humanize him a bit.
It sort of tells us something about the portrait of the artist as a young man, as it were, if I can borrow from Joyce. It gives us a sense of who they were and what they were like. It's the letter Fitzgerald wrote, mailed to someone. This is the ledger book he held and kept with him throughout his life and returned to and filled in. Or we have Sylvia Plath's copy of The Great Gatsby that she annotated. You'll get to see Sylvia Plath's notes in the margins of her copy. There's nowhere else in the world you can come and see that particular item, right? It's only here at South Carolina.
I thought it was so cool. I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, we have Sylvia Plath's copy of The Great Gatsby? And Michael was like, yeah, we do. It's like nothing special. And I'm like, it is, though, you know.
Exhibits really are about storytelling, and so by doing the exhibit, we're sort of doing our own remediation and interpretation of the novel and the world it's trying to represent. It's not that different in some ways from a movie or a podcast about The Great Gatsby. You could call it a living podcast, I guess, if you want. People will come, they'll read materials, they'll hear some voiceover stuff, there'll be QR codes, and they'll get to sort of see the physical aspects of the history of this book. As much as I would love for everyone in the world to be able to come to South Carolina and work with these materials, it's impractical. And so digitization allows us to broaden access to our shared cultural heritage. And I think it's really important that museums, libraries, and institutions of higher education work to make these valuable, high-point cultural heritage touchstones accessible in a digital format when that's possible.
I think it's incredibly important for the access. Most people don't go to the University of South Carolina, or they don't live in this area. Some people don't even know that we have them just because they aren't online. You know, if you're able to search it up or even like search it within our database, it is so much easier. If I was researching this just in general or like back in high school, this would have been so helpful to see a lot of the thought processes going into the making of the novel and what other, people thought of it.
The great thing about having these rare and valuable items in a public institution or a cultural heritage institution rather than in a private collection means that members of the public get a chance to interact with them. How often do you get to see a first edition of The Great Gatsby? For most people, it's going to be a rare and scarce occurrence. And so when we have these exhibitions, we want to promote them and make sure that people know that they are welcomed and that they can come and interact with these materials and learn from the interpretive apparatus of the exhibit itself. We regularly get people emailing us with questions, but we also get people from all over the world who come to the reading room and work with the materials for their own research. We've had people from Norway, Switzerland, Japan, all over the world who come to work with this collection, and it makes South Carolina a destination for Fitzgerald scholarship. What I think exhibits like this do that's exciting and useful is that it reminds people about Gatsby. Oh yeah, I liked that book, I read it in high school. But it also gives people new perspectives and new interpretive lenses for how to understand the novel. So in addition to perhaps rereading the novel or revisiting it, or coming to the physical exhibit or logging on and looking at the digital exhibit and seeing the first edition, we're putting the novel in conversation with other aspects of material culture that help broaden their understanding of the work. We're a public institution and it's here to share with everybody.